Support for the Leadoff on WGLT and WGLT.org comes from the Central Illinois Regional Airport. Passengers can access air travel from Sierra with parking at no cost and at a location close to home. More at CIRA.com.
Rivian sees some relief from the ongoing trade wars. That's one of the things you need to know to start your day for Friday, November 7th. I'm Lauren Warnicki, and this is WGLT's The Leadoff. Now let's lead off with how Trump administration trade and regulatory policy initially hurt Rivian. Changes in the administration's stance may now help some. WGLT's Charlie Schlenker has more.
Rivian cannot recognize over $100 million in previously expected revenue from sales of regulatory tax credits to other auto companies that need them to meet fuel economy and emissions rules. Federal enforcement shifts have disrupted the market for those credits. Regulatory credits had been a part of the Rivian road to profitability. Tariffs have also complicated Rivian's efforts to gain steady profit. Those too hurt at first. There, though, the news is getting better.
And we're really appreciative of the administration for these new changes.
That's Rivian's Chief Financial Officer, Claire McDonough. She was talking about Commerce Department announcements that it is lengthening a tariff offset for auto parts to the year 2030 and expanding the pool of eligible parts for the offset. CEO RJ Scaringe says it moves the cost of tariffs for each vehicle from $2,000 to a few $100. Scaringe says changing trade policy with the European Union to eliminate import duties into Europe for U.S. autos is giving another boost to Rivian.
Certainly something we've been quite enthusiastic about and we're pleased to see. And it hasn't had as much attention as we think it deserves.
Scaringe says Rivian had eventually planned on exporting its new R2 SUV to Europe.
There's a real opportunity to get into Europe sooner.
How much sooner, Rivian isn't saying. For the Leadoff, I'm Charlie Schlenker.
Here are some other stories we're following in the WGLT newsroom. A McLean County judge has sentenced an 18-year-old from Bloomington to 30 years in prison for stabbing another teen to death. Luis Monroy was charged as an adult at age 16 for the murder of 19-year-old Nicholas Zapata of Normal 2 years ago. Criminal justice advocates are cheering the passing of a state proposal sealing the criminal records of more than 2 million Illinoisans. The Clean Slate Act awaits the governor's signature. And a federal judge has ruled immigration agents cannot use riot control weapons without jurisdiction or warning. This in response to ramped up immigration raids in Chicago. You can find more on these stories at WGLT.org. Connection was a primary theme of the 8th annual McLean County Behavioral Health Forum at Illinois State University yesterday. One of the presenters, licensed counselor Jen Woodrum, tells WGLT correspondent Braden Fogerson, self-regulation is not something we do alone.
That ability to self-regulate is developed from relationship and from community and co-regulation, which is our ability to regulate with others.
With the way that society is now, things really changed after the pandemic with how we interact with one another, with how a lot of people's dispositions are right now. Yeah. Is there anything that's different in that space now, say over the last 5 years, than what it used to be before?
Yeah. Well, I really think about how the pandemic did impact our co-regulation abilities. I mean, we had significant periods of time where we were in isolation and we did not have access to the same kinds of co-regulation that we did before, and especially for people who had a history of trauma or who didn't have access even before the pandemic to co-regulation, that isolation would have been even more triggering. So I think depending on different people's developmental stages, that isolation may have impacted us in different ways. Like for young kids and teens who were just developing some of those co-regulation skills and then had this very limited access to community and support, it had an impact on their nervous system in one kind of way, whereas adults who we may have been used to a certain type of connection and losing that has an impact in a different way.
And Jennifer, I'm glad you brought up especially the teens and children aspects of this, that it's a little bit different for them. I wanted to ask you this phenomenon of what some people call iPad kids, right? Kids that maybe 10 years ago were going to get their first phone or those electronics at, late middle school, early high school age. now it's much more prevalent for kids to start using iPads and playing things like, playing games, but also, learning from like Cocomelon and things like that. Does that have an effect on the way that children interact with each other now? Either by showing, how selfless or selfish they can be, or just how they can regulate their emotions because they're being stimulated earlier on in their life than they used to be.
Yeah. I think, interestingly, if we don't have access to another human for co-regulation, we seek something else. For kids, that can be a blanket or a comfort item or an iPad or an electronic. So for children, it makes sense that they have sought out, and especially with how easy access kids now have to so many types of electronics, it has become a form of co-regulation, but one that isn't quite as soothing and regulating to our nervous system as human to human regulation is. I mean, you're right, there's overstimulation that happens in that. There's an impact on the sensory processing system from so many different types of like sounds and sights that are different than what the nervous system at that age is biologically accustomed to. And a lot of kids and teens are now developing relationships online, which is wonderful that we have access to be able to maintain relationships in some ways. But if we think about the part of our nervous system that is connected to others, there's this whole circuit system called ventral vagal. That's the part of our nervous system that can regulate. It's called the social engagement system, and it's when we feel calm and safe and connected. And that part of our nervous system has a lot of connections to our facial features, our eye contact, the sounds that we hear, our voice, our perception with our face to another person's face. So when we take out that whole part of connection with another person and it's just words on a screen, we lose a really important part of what feels like safety and regulation to our bodies.
That was Counselor Jen Woodrum from the McLean County Behavioral Health Forum speaking with reporter Braden Fogerson. You can hear more of this interview today at 5 on Sound Ideas. Before we let you go, downtown Bloomington celebrates a quarter century of art with its 25th annual Art Walk. It continues through tomorrow morning at more than a dozen locations. And that's it for today. I'm Lauren Warnicki. The show was produced by Cheyenne Brown. You can subscribe to the Leadoff on the NPR app or wherever you get your podcasts.